In Kiyoshi Kurosawa's Chime, an obsession with metal permeates through the entire frame. It enters our consciousness literally in the first frames of the film, panning vertically from metal pipes to a modern cooking school setup where a chef is observing the process of his students. But more than the metal itself, the film is about how this metal turns into a menacing presence that cuts into the skin of the first person, later stabs into a second person, finally threatens a third random stranger in a public place, as if it's a three-step recipe followed by the filmmaker to prepare a psychological meal for us. From the very beginning, one realizes that there's this cutting action which metal is constantly associated with, albeit in a way that at first appears mostly benign. It happens most evidently through the metal knife which Sensei Matsuka uses to demonstrate the cutting of an onion. But it also happens subtly, as the metallic train's shadows periodically cut through sunlight entering the class. In such a way, the cutting action assumes both a macabre presence yet a mundane reality within the setting. Matsuka later explains to a detective that even the dangerousness of a knife can be forgotten when the stress-free act of cooking is in progress. But when a reclusive, restless student shows up to this class and ominously starts hearing chimes inside the room, events in the story start taking a sinister turn. While at first metal predominates the audiovisual reality of the frame, the sounds of the chimes we hear later seem to appear from an imaginary, unknown source. Ironically, these abstract chimes are quite different from the metals in the frame, and yet connect to them as being sounds produced by a metal instrument. The over-the-shoulder dolly towards our chef cleaning his platform introduces these non-diegetic chimes into a frame from which only diegetic sounds were previously heard. This essay hopes to explain these very cryptic chimes as part of a larger psychological story the director manages to convey.
あ、そうか先生。さっき生徒の田代さんが先生の住所を教えてくれって聞いてきたんです。もちろん教えませんでしたけど、それでよかったですね。
The student Tashiro, a boy who seems to have weirdly asked for the chef's home address, eventually claims that after a surgery was performed on him, the scar on his neck disappeared, making him believe that his brain is now partly human and partly machine. And although he takes this literally and cuts into his head, all we see is blood coming out instead of a machine. But what if this machine was a more subtle part of a virtual psyche? Instead of being physiologically literal, the act of the metal now cutting into the skin sets off this traumatic event that causes horror in the affection image, piercing into the very fabric of Matsuka's own reality. So even though we might not have seen a machine after this suicidal event, there is a strange metallic machine that now makes its presence felt, leading to other similar odd events. One such puzzling event happens at Mr. Matsuka's meal table. When he asks his son about pursuing some hobby at a student club, he follows the question up by telling him not to overdo it,
でもまあほどほどにしとけ。
receiving a really weird reaction from his son. But in hindsight, we can gather that this otherwise odd line only makes sense when looking at how Tashiro's own overdoing of the cutting action ultimately signified a possessed psyche, and Matsuka's line appears to be a word of caution against this. While Tashiro himself became a victim to his pathology, the invasion of the horror machine can be inferred by how Matsuka stabs another student Akemi in an eerily similar fashion as Tashiro stabbed into the bread, as if just when the train's passing once again cuts into the sunlight, the chef becomes possessed in a similar fashion. And so within the logic of Chime, this very obsession with metals turns a benign cutting action into a malignant one, like a virus that is slowly and insidiously spreading. One such obvious symptom of this obsession is seen when we go back to the lunch conversation, and the boy's weird laughing reaction to his father's warning reminds the mother of the need to dispose of large bags of metal cans, and the sound of the clanking metal overpowers the scene even after the camera cuts back to the table, as if the urban act of throwing away metal cans distracts from the human mundane act of eating food. When Mr. Matsuka rushes out of the class after supposedly having seen the ghost of Akemi, he suddenly notices the mirror on the ground floor and looks at himself in what Deleuze points out is a time image, because the actual of his self and his virtual form behind the mirror are now both in one frame. In that very moment, the diegetic and non-diegetic sounds cancel each other out, followed by silence. It is here where the character realizes his point of no return, because whether he now sees himself as man or machine is up for debate. So when Mr. Matsuka manages to get home, he notices his son is also hooked to this odd metallic obsession, and then we see the mother herself showing signs of turning into a pleasure machine. So as Matsuka looks at the knife again, finally understanding the evil presence of the metal, he notices the electronic bell ringing, whose tune is remarkably similar to the chimes ringing through the film. At this point, we might want to go back to the enigmatic detail of Tashiro trying to find Matsuka's home address. What did it ultimately mean? This detail becomes important towards the end of the film, because although Tashiro's dead, the film's cut to phantasmagorical CCTV visuals show us a virtual ghost, as if Tashiro as Phantom Machine has finally reached Matsuka's home. This drives the protagonist mad, but when he regains himself to answer the electronic chime, the machine completely takes over the frame, looking like grainy digital footage with screeching metallic sounds building up to a loud climactic cacophony. As Matsuka looks back at his house, to me it seemed as if this ending finally shows his consciousness becoming the machine, leaving it to the viewer to wonder what happens after this. In this way, Chime is a mystery that keeps on giving. Its enigma makes a lot of sense when placed in the context of Shinto religious beliefs, within which items of daily existence become objects of worship or kami. In the metallic world of Kiyoshi Kurosawa, it is these very objects that take a darker turn simply because they are abused and overused by the modern man. In Japan's highly urban setup of rapid growth and development, the mind is seen taking an increasingly narcissistic turn, and it is this turn that signifies the entry of psychic horrors into the mundane lives of the people.